Up until then, I spent a lot of time being big fish in a small pond. And that was the first time I got to get regular looks at the truth. Like, you can get better being big fish in a small pond, but you need regular looks at the truth as well. You need to get humbled by someone.
Welcome to Forever White Belt, the podcast for everyone who's passionate about jiu-jitsu. I'm your host, Adolfo Ferranda. On today's episode, we're joined by Keith Kavanagh, a 10th Planet brown belt under Brandon Mccaghren. Hailing from Ireland, Keith traveled back and forth, training at 10th Planet Decatur, Alabama, with Brandon, and his jiu-jitsu knowledge and teaching skills are second to none. Jiu-jitsu is just one of Keith's passions. He also runs a multimedia company. We talked to Keith about his jiu-jitsu journey, his teaching approach, and his tips for improving your game. Of note, Keith makes reference to a BMAC throughout the episode. Just so you know, this is short for Brandon Mccaghren. And with that, I give you Keith Kavanagh. Keith, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Keith, you're a brown belt?
Yep.
Under Brandon Mccaghren,
Under
correct?
Brandon Mccaghren, yeah.
You have a very interesting sort of background in that you are in Ireland, but you were doing like a couple months stints in Alabama at 10th Planet Decatur as well, traveling back and forth, sort of, right?
Yep. So I'd spend like 3 months over there. I'd come back for a few months and go over, and I did that for a few years until lockdowns hit.
When you went there, what belt rank were you at that point?
I was a purple when I first went there.
Let's backtrack a bit and talk about your beginning days into where you are now, or up to that Alabama point, if you will.
So I started off at a gym in town. When I first wanted to start MMA, I was told that there was 2 gyms in the town. One was way more beginner friendly and the other one was way more serious. And now looking back, the one that I actually was told was way more serious, I probably should have went to that gym. But I went to this other gym and the coach was a white belt. He was affiliated with a different gym, which is where we'd go up every now and then, and eventually got my blue belt there. But that gym kind of ended up closing. Then I've just been moving around a lot since then, basically.
Give us like a viewpoint of what the first month of your jiu-jitsu looked like.
Okay, so the very first class, I didn't know what jiu-jitsu was. I went in and the guy was teaching triangle chokes. And at the time, I was just like, I wonder if this stuff works. And for some reason, he decided to demonstrate on me. I didn't understand the whole tapping concept. So my very first class, I just wake up with a bunch of people looking at me and I had this moment of confusion. And then I had this moment of, okay, I need to learn it all. Have not gone to sleep since.
That's insane, man. Okay.
Yeah.
What is Subconscious Studios? Are you still doing that?
Yeah, so that actually started with Keelan, my friend Keelan, who's a brown belt under Brandon as well. Every time I'd go over to Alabama, BMAC would kind of task me with a few new things to try get good at. So the first time I went over, it was like, okay, I'm going to show you how to run a podcast. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to hold a camera. Now I'm going to show you how to video edit. And Keelan helped me out a lot with that. But Subconscious Studios was originally his. And then when I wanted to set up my own business over here in Ireland, I was trying to think of a name. He was just like, why don't you just do Subconscious Studios too? And we'll just say that we're co-owners, even though they're technically separate businesses. But yeah, so that's how Subconscious Studios came about. It all started from Keelan getting injured, and he had done vlogs on YouTube before. I think he was a blue belt at the time, maybe a white belt, but BMAC needed someone to film stuff, and Keelan had a torn ACL but still wanted to be in the gym. So he was like, oh, I'll video stuff and I'll just be able to stay at the gym. And then eventually Keelan started making a living off of that, and Subconscious Studios came from there. BMAC's a great guy for bringing his people up. He's not just trying to make money himself. He's a great guy for getting other people involved. And even if it's just like a small bit of money at the start, it's just like high tide raises all ships. And he wants us all to get rich together, basically.
Talk about your early days in the gi. Because I know you're primarily a no-gi guy,
yeah.
If not a totally no-gi guy now.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your gi experience?
So even up to blue belt, I probably wore the gi less than 10 times before I got my blue belt. This was before the Eddie and Hoyler 2 match, and I didn't know about how some gyms might get offended if you wore other gyms' rash guards. So for my gi grading for a blue belt, I had my gi on, but I had a 10 Planet rash guard on underneath. And it did not go down well. I remember doing the Iron Man, like the whole Shark Tank, and there was some black belt who came out at one point, and he just slapped, bumped, and then he just like got a grip on my collar, and he was just like, "Oh, Eddie Bravo," and then he bet the absolute piss out of me.
That's so funny. I remember when I started as well, I didn't know any of these politics because I knew nothing
Yep.
about jiu-jitsu. And before my first day, like I used to study Eddie Bravo stuff
Yeah.
too, just to have a sort of a context of what I'm getting into. And so there I go. And it was like a sort of a Hoyler affiliated academy.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm throwing like rubber guard like an idiot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been there. I've definitely been there. There was a big change, like over here before the Eddie and Hoyler match. 10th Planet was definitely looked down on, and it still has a bit of a weird name, but it's definitely not like it was before that match.
What plants the seed for you to go to Alabama of all places?
Ever since white belt, I used to be active on the 10 Planet website on the forum, and I think Brandon was a purple belt at the time, and I thought his videos were cool, and then he was responding to me in the forum, and I was just kind of fanboying out at the time, being like, oh my god, this is so cool. But then ended up staying in contact with him, and eventually when I was a purple belt, he was coming over to Ireland to teach seminars. I let him stay at my house. I took care of him. We brought him around, and then a few weeks later he called me when he was back in Alabama, and he was just like, you showed me such good hospitality, I want to return the favor. So he was just like, get over to Alabama, we'll take care of you, don't worry about accommodation, just get over here, train. And that was only a 2-week trip that I did, but after the 2 weeks at the end, he was driving me back to the airport, and he was just like, yeah, just so you know, if we're looking for another coach, we'll keep you in mind. And I was just kind of like, yeah, cool, whatever. But then about 6 months later, he called me and he was just like, okay, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, okay. So then that's how the 3-month trip started. And yeah, best decision I've ever made.
What's Decatur and Alabama like in the summertime?
Oh, disgustingly hot.
I'm a California boy and I've never been there. So
I'm sure you're used to it.
It's 70 degrees here every day.
You're used to the heat. But for me, who's used to the cold in Ireland, when I went over there, oh my God. There's a video still of BMAC teaching, he was teaching some meat hook stuff from the rubber guard, and it was my first few days being over there in the summer. And even though I haven't even started training, I am sweating profusely. It's just dripping and I'm constantly wiping myself. And that video is still in existence up there somewhere. Yeah, I love Alabama. I love the people of Alabama. Everyone was so, when I was going over, I had so many people being like, why Alabama? And then I kind of asked that. I was just kind of wondering as well, why am I going to Alabama? Like, besides BMAC, what else is there in Alabama? I just love the people of Alabama. The Southern hospitality is a real thing. And it really made me feel at home, because that is also a thing over here as well. Sometimes, not all the time, but there is a lot of elements of Southern style hospitality over here.
Yeah, I remember seeing like some of your IG posts in the research that we were doing in Alabama, and like this huge rack of ribs and just all kinds of crazy stuff like that. It was.
Oh, okay, right. Those ribs, they have a special place in my heart. That was my friend Chris. He's a purple belt, and he made these ribs on a smoker. I have never ate something in my life that literally stopped me in my tracks, and my brain just kind of stopped working for a few seconds as I enjoyed it. I've seen ribs on menus in restaurants since, and I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to replicate that feeling ever again. I'm just going to be disappointed.
It seems like such a special place in that, and Brandon is such a special person. His teaching is just so elite.
Yeah.
Incredibly technical. I see a lot of similarities now when I see some of your teaching style as well, which is very technical. Your communication skills when you're teaching is excellent, quite excellent. How have you developed as an instructor, a coach?
Ever since the first gym I was at, I was teaching fairly early on, because the coach was a white belt. I got my blue belt before him. So I've been teaching from very early on in my jiu-jitsu, and I've taught at a lot of different gyms. But I definitely credit my ability to convey the information to BMAC. He's so good at conveying the information in an easy to understand way, but also he captivates a class. It's not like you're not just going through the motions or being told this is what you do. He has a great way of explaining it and keeping your attention throughout the whole thing, and he makes it fun. Because for me, a big part of it is I have to have fun. I have to be enjoying what I'm doing. Like, obviously the training is going to be hard sometimes, and you're not going to enjoy it sometimes, but I need to enjoy what I'm doing. I don't want to just go to the like super traditional schools where it's just bowing out and all this kind of stuff. Just not for me.
How did your training differ in Alabama versus, in Ireland?
When I first started going to Alabama, I was teaching at a gym in my town called Primal. Primal is the best gym in my town. Excellent gym. I've my brother-in-law, who I actually live with, he's one of the coaches there. He's a purple belt. But at the time in Primal, I was a purple belt. The other coach was a purple, and then there was a lot of white belts, and then maybe 2-3 blue belts, if even. So when I went over to Alabama, my very first 3 months there, one of the first few days I went over and we did our class. It was beginner's class, and then after that was advanced. And advanced was just a lot of positionals. But one guy I was going against, I was inside his closed guard, and he just had inside position with his knee on my bicep, and he triangled me like 3 or 4 times. And then afterwards I was like, "Oh, how long are you training?" He was like, 6 months. And I was like, "Oh, I see." So thank you, Seth. Shout out to Seth over in Planet Decatur. He's now a purple belt. Ever since he was a white belt, he's had like purple belt level back control and triangles. And then outside of that, it was evident he was a white belt. But other than that, if you got caught in his closed guard, or if he got in your back, you were in trouble if you were a blue, purple belt. Some visiting brown belts I've seen get absolutely toyed with by him.
Isn't that crazy how some people just have that?
Yeah, they just pick up the information well, but it's also like there's definitely an element of talent to it. But I also seen Seth be the first guy there and the last one to leave, and then even after class ended, he would get one of the guys and be drilling whatever we were doing again and again and again. So it's like you put in the work combined with having that the talent is a scary combination.
So what is your go-to then? What was your propensity sort of early on?
So it started off as triangles at white belt, but then quickly went into leg locks. And then I got a hold of, in the early EBI days, there was a guy who I was talking to from Portland, and he did a private with Nathan Orchard, and I got my hands on, like, before anyone was talking about Ashigarami and all this kind of stuff, I got a rundown of all these positions, and I just felt like a superhero in the country. Like anyone who I went against, as soon as I got into the legs, I just felt like I was on a different level. But then I got really sick of leg locks. I got bored of leg locks at purple belt, because I don't think I finished anything outside of a leg lock at blue and purple belt, early purple belt. And now I'm sick of them. Now I like using them just to take the back or pass the guard, but I just want to get on top, stay on top, and crush humans. That's my favorite thing to do.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was watching a lot of your competition. Well, the few that you have on YouTube of like something like 7 years ago, and you look very different. You're much thinner then, you know, and yeah, it was a lot of leg attacks. You're doing a lot of this sort of jazz hands, you know, kind of T-Rexy kind of stuff. What was it like then when you were doing that? Is that the moment you were thinking, like, I'm the superhero?
At the time it was working, but a lot of what I was doing, it was just tricks. It's like tricks that, like, if I went against like maybe a higher belt, I might catch him once, but good luck catching him again with that same trick. So I feel like eventually, so I had got my purple belt, and then eventually I went to start training at East Coast Jiu Jitsu with Darragh O'Connell for a year. And I actually did wear the gi for that year as well, a good bit, but it was only because of the level in Darragh's gym and getting to be able to train with Darragh. I was just like, I'm going to take advantage of being able to train with this high of a level. Because over here, I think that gym is the highest level gym I've ever got to train at. Whereas in Alabama, it seems like there is a lot of gyms those gyms are more prominent. It's just such a big place in America compared to over here. So there's a few gyms like that over here, but that's definitely, I'd say East Coast is the top gym in this country.
So I neglected to ask, where are you at now?
Yeah, so I coach at Beyond Jiu-Jitsu in Balbriggan, which is in Dublin. So I'm actually in Drogheda, which is about 30 minutes away from Dublin. But Balbriggan is only about 25 minutes. It's like on the edge of Dublin, close to me.
Beyond Jiu-Jitsu then, can you talk about the academy, the culture?
This is one of the things that I love about Beyond. When I went over to Alabama, once I came back, I just felt like I went from living the dream to just not feeling quite right at the gyms that I was training at. It just kind of felt like the gyms I was going to, I really had to like mind my P's and Q's. Like I felt like I couldn't joke around or like have fun as much. And then when lockdowns happened, we had like one of the longest lockdowns in the world. Our lockdown was like a year and a half, 2 years or something like that. It was ridiculous. Gyms were closed for that long. But once the gyms opened up again, my friend Aaron, who is the other brown belt at this gym, he was just like, I'll come down to the open mat on Fridays, we'll get some rounds in. I went down, and then the day after I got a text from the head coach, who's a black belt, Wayne Fagan, and Wayne was just like, do you want to come down and teach leg locks to the guys? And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And then after about a month of that, I was like, Wayne, I'm so fucking sick of leg locks. Can I please teach something else? And he was like, yep, do whatever you want. So I've just loved it there ever since. I just feel like it's a nice mix between, we can laugh, we can joke around with each other, we can make fun of each other, and it's all done in a lighthearted way, but we still train hard. We still get the hard rounds in. And the gym has kind of become a bit of a hub on Sundays for our open mat. We get people from all over the place and all these different gyms coming, and it's just usually good times.
How are you seeing the talent in your region, in your area, sort of developing?
There's some serious up-and-comers. Like I know Sam McNally made a bit of a name for himself at the ADCC, but Sam trains with a bunch of other savages. So Sam now has his own academy, but that East Coast gym where Sam used to train, you've got Marcus Phelan, who is probably one of the top black belts in the country. We've got Shane Fishman, who is dominating right now. Shane Fishman, I think he's actually Canadian, but he moved over here for a few years. There's a lot of up-and-comers. One of the big ones I think everyone needs to look out for is Richie B. Richie, I'm not going to say his last name. He'll get mad if I pronounce it wrong. Sorry, Richie. Yeah, Richie B is one of the guys who I think he's gonna be a known name on the scene over the next year or two. Yeah, but other than that, Jim, there still is some other really good guys. Like Kieran Davern is doing great work out with his guys in a place called Tullamore. We've got Tom Halpin, who just opened up his own academy up on the top of the country. And from what I've seen in the pictures and videos, his academy is doing excellent already, which makes sense. We had Tom over for a seminar a few weeks back. Excellent seminar.
So growth is still happening.
Still happening. I think it's in a really good place right now.
There's always those savages in the academies that may not compete, or people don't know their names, but they're just absolute monsters. And they're like, hey, this guy's great and he's got all the gold medals, but there's these other guys, or there's this guy.
My friend Az went to our other friend's gym, Open Mat, a few weeks ago, and he was like, Keith, I roll with this black belt. I didn't have any idea who he was, but it turns out he's actually he's a coach for, I don't know if you've ever seen Gaelic football over here. It's just a big sport over here. But he has coached teams to like championships and everything. We didn't have a clue he was a black belt, but my friend Az rolled with him and he was just like, man, this guy's, his half guard game was so good. Could not pass I don't even know. Apparently he played a very slow game. He played a quarter guard game and just couldn't, Az just said he just had so much trouble passing his guard, but learned a lot afterwards because the guy was really helpful too. But there's a lot of characters like that who just don't compete, you wouldn't expect, and they are monsters.
So I want to talk about your, this may sound weird, but physique a little bit, right? So when I was watching you early on, like as I mentioned, the 7 years ago, and you were kind of this skinny player or whatever, you filled out quite a bit. You look a lot different. So can you talk about your sort of training regimen?
So over lockdown, when we couldn't go to the gyms, we weren't able to do much at all. Like there was a few times where we get the mats out in the back garden and kind of do some stuff, but we couldn't really do a huge amount. We weren't even able to leave a certain amount of kilometers of our town at one point. I spent a while of just like doing that, and then I kind of got into like streaming games just because I was like, right, I need to do something just to keep myself occupied. But then I started noticing I was falling into some shitty habits, and I was like, right, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And then I got into cooking, which all the pasta helped. But then my friend Mark Andrews, he's a professional fighter up north, and basically I wrote to him and I was like, because I know he deals with a lot of just like fitness stuff as well, and I asked him for just some tips or some exercises I could do, and he just put together a little workout sheet, and it was just some bodyweight stuff and some kettlebell stuff. But I did that 3 times a week for maybe 7 or 8 months. Yeah, that filled me out. That and just eating way more pasta. I just got into cooking and started making way too many. Pretty much anything I can make is an Italian dish, and I definitely attribute that to it, because once I went over to Alabama, I was the highest weight I've ever been. I was 84 kilos, and I could not keep the weight on over there. I could not eat enough while I was sweating as much as I was to be able to keep that weight on. So I came home after 3 months about 75, 76 kilos, and now I'm down to 72, which is ridiculous. I still feel like I look way more filled out than I would have years ago, but I can notice the difference in my shoulders being a bit smaller and my face just looks a bit more drawn in. But I like how strong I feel at this weight, but at the same time, I liked how I felt at 84-ish as well. So I'm thinking about just trying to get back on the gain train and eat a lot more pasta and see if I can just get that weight back on.
Are you focused right now on competing anymore?
I still want to compete. I was focused on teaching for the last while. I had a neck injury. I had micro tears going up the left side of my neck, and I'm only back training about a week and a half. I couldn't roll for 4 weeks. It was literally the only injury I've ever had that would have me screaming in pain in public. I would just be like waiting on a train, and I would just go to turn my head slightly, and it would spasm and it would lock, and it was horrendous. So I had to get that looked at. Found out there was micro tears. They just told me just to rest it and use heat. So I just spent basically 4 weeks with a hot water bottle, this long hot water bottle that I have wrapped around my neck basically. I did want to compete, but I just had to just not be an idiot. And even though I wanted to roll, especially after a few weeks, and I was like, I could probably roll now, I just still had to be a bit more strict with myself. Yeah, I had to baby it. Because I remember when I went to get my neck looked at, he said there was the micro tears, and then he said, your top few vertebrae aren't great, but they're okay. And I was like, oh, okay. okay, right, well, I'm never letting anyone touch my head ever again. I'm so confident in like my guillotine counters and stuff like that I just let people wrap my head, but now not anymore. I'm just not doing that ever.
Can you tell me a time that you saw something in jiu-jitsu that changed the direction of your teaching? Like aha moment or moments?
There's been a lot of aha moments, and especially with BMAC, especially when BMAC came over here, there was a lot of things that I feel like I was overthinking a lot of jiu-jitsu, and a lot of problems I'd have, BMAC would say like one sentence and I'd just be like, oh, I'm an idiot. Okay, yeah, fair enough. And I think just getting to feel what it was like rolling with BMAC and feeling how effortless it was for him to do the destructive things he was doing, that was a big part for me, where I was just like, okay, right, you can not move too much and still do a lot of damage. Like, the more movement, more chance of getting caught. That made me change my whole perspective on my game. But I was still kind of just putting it into practice more so than trying to teach it, because I didn't really know how to teach that at the time. But it definitely made me change how I was looking at jiu-jitsu.
What makes a great jiu-jitsu student?
Someone who's coachable, someone who, there's a lot of people who will ask questions, but they ask questions just so they can be seen asking questions. And it's as if once you start to answer, it just goes over their head and they don't take it on board. They just wanted to seem interested. But then you've got the guys who, when they ask a question, you can tell they genuinely they're genuinely curious, and they believe in what I'm about to say. And also, I think a lot of our guys know that I'll be honest, and I'll tell them if they ask me something and I'm just a bit confused by it, I'll just be like, yeah, sorry, I'm not the guy for that. Go look up Rafa Mendes, go look up whatever. I never want to be that high priest in the gym who just pretends he knows everything.
What makes a great jiu-jitsu instructor?
So Sean Applegate said something to me a few years ago, and I think about this a lot. He said most jiu-jitsu coaches are made up of three things. There is the instructor, the coach, and the mentor. And most coaches only hit two of those really well. So BMAC, for example, lately he is kind of diving into the coaching side, but he's not really the guy who's going to be there in your corner for all your competitions. So BMAC would kind of fall short on the coaching side, but as an instructor and as a mentor, excellent. The best in the world, in my opinion. Then you've got Sean Applegate, for example. Sean Applegate, I've had him in my corner for competitions, and I've never had such clear, concise advice ever. And just even when the round, as the match is changing, he is still giving the perfect advice. So I think Sean, great coach, excellent instructor, but because he's a bit more reserved and quiet and keeps to himself a lot, maybe not the mentor side of things. But I do think about that a lot with all coaches, and I wonder where I fall under. I think I fall under the coach and the instructor side. There's been times where the mentor stuff has come up, but it's usually just someone will ask me a question and I'll just repeat something BMAC said to me. And then they're just like, oh, that's really smart. And I'm just like, yeah, Brandon.
Just a reminder to please give us a 5-star review on Apple Music and Spotify, and become a VIP member for only 99 cents a month. Get ad-free episodes at anchor.fm/foreverwhitebelt/subscribe. And check us out on Instagram at Forever White Belt Show. Go buy your Forever White Belt swag at teespring.com/forever-white-belt. Check us out on YouTube now at Forever White Belt. Finally, if you ever get to beautiful Northern California, please come roll with us at North Bay Jiu Jitsu in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. They're amazing instructors, and everyone there are great people. Mention the podcast and get 2 weeks free. Touching upon that then, how do you keep your sword sharp in that teaching instructing department?
I never go to the gym just trying to pull off my A game all the time. I'll always try to figure out what it is that I'm doing that's good and that's working on the highest level guys I go against. And I try to find what's the best way for me to teach this to the guys. And then when I'm rolling for those few weeks while I'm teaching this, I'm literally going to just go out my way to hit that same thing repeatedly. I learn a lot about the moves myself when I'm doing that too. But I think just that's helped me not just get stagnant and not get stuck just doing my A game all the time. I think Alabama helps me a lot as well, because over here, I wouldn't get tapped a huge amount. Like I did a few times here and there. Over in Alabama, like Brandon, I know his game so well that he might not tap me, but he'll make me suffer. Or I'm not saying he won't tap me. He'll still tap me. But then you've got Matt Scaff. Scaff will, if he touches my head, I die. I might know the sequence that he's going through, but how many times can I defend in that sequence? It's like you're just stuck in a loop where you never fully escape the trap. You might escape one choke, but you never escape the trap. So when I get to feel something like that, or when I get to feel like BMAC's heaviness, once I come over here, I try to implement that into my own game. I try to replicate it, and I try to do that to the guys over here. And then I learn a lot about their game, like Scaff and BMAC's game, by doing that. And then the next time I go over, I'm usually a bit better prepared for them. But it just helps me keep evolving. There's always something for me to do, always someone for me to steal from, basically.
Tell us about the themes that you see in terms of your context there with students at various belt levels. Are there sort of repeating patterns? At white belt, this seems to be a common deficiency. At blue belt, this seems to be a common deficiency. At purple, brown.
The lower belts are definitely more greedy, and it gets them messed up.
That's a fantastic descriptor. I often say that too. I said, "Oh, you're getting greedy."
Here, I get greedy sometimes too. Sometimes I get a bit too ambitious when I'm rolling. And it's just because I know if this was a competition, I wouldn't be getting this ambitious. But if I'm just rolling around and we're just kind of like playing, like I'm gonna try some stuff. And then sometimes, let's say I get swept, I'm just like, okay, you got greedy and you paid for it.
That's nice. What about like going up, how about blue belt?
A description I like that BMAC said a few years ago is blue belts do the right thing. They just suck at it. That's why they're blue belts. But then on the other side of it, I think also something else, another guy I do videos for, Jake Reeves, he was saying before that if you're a blue belt and someone can walk in off the street and hold you down, you're not a blue belt. So I think there's a few things like that I try to keep in mind when it comes to blue belts.
Where do you want your game to go? And I'd say even more importantly, what do you wish you were better at?
My game has changed so much over the years. Like white, blue, and purple was leg locks and rubber guard, pretty much. And now if I'm on bottom, I'm annoyed that I ended up there. Or maybe I'm just feeling a bit lazy and I'm going to try sweep to get on top and then just get my game going. But I want, the first time I went to Alabama, I remember Brandon picked me up from the airport and Scaff called him. And I hadn't met Scaff at this point. And Brandon was just like, "Oh, you're going to have a great role with Scaff." And I was like, "Yeah, I can't wait." And Brandon was just like, "If you turtle, you'll die." And I was like, "Okay, I won't turtle then." And Brandon was just like, "You'll turtle." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I rolled with Scaff and I realized, oh, once he touches your head or if you turtle, you are dead. So I want that level. Like I feel like I've improved with my front headlock game so much just from trying to replicate Scaff's game, but it's still not at the level. Like anytime I maybe have an attack, and I'm usually good at following up, even if they escape this one, I can transition to this one. But if they do slip their head out altogether, I'm just like, oh, like I feel so defeated. That hurts me. That cuts me deep when that happens. It's like if I get on someone's back and I don't get a rear naked choke, I feel like a failure. That bothers me.
I wish there was more footage that I could see of Scaff, and because everyone always tells me about these, these anacondas and these darces and these guillotines of his, and these head and arms and everything related to that. And I've seen some instruction by him and it looks fantastic, sort of what he's doing. I just wish I could see more.
Scaff's a strange guy. He likes to keep to himself, doesn't really have any competition drive. And lately, over the last few years, he's really dove into the coaching role and he kind of has a team of MMA guys that he's helping out. I would love to see Scaff compete, even though he has zero interest in it. Even though I've seen him go against such high-level guys who came to visit the gym, and Scaff is incredible. Like, there's a video I have from when I was in Alabama last summer, and I think it's a 6-minute round, and Scaff chokes me about 7 or 8 times. It's ridiculous.
I've seen you, I believe one of your IGs or something where you're instructing, it's like an anaconda and that kind of thing, and you attribute it, a lot of it is to your study of Scaff. And it seems like you've had a hell of an improvement in the whole, regardless of what you say, in the whole neck and head department there.
Like, I'm not at that Scaff level, but I know that as far as front headlock game goes, I feel like I could probably explain the front headlock system and just like how the choke's tied together better than almost anyone. I feel really confident in that game, but Scaff is way better.
How about telling me a time when you experienced something in jiu-jitsu that sort of changed the direction of your approach to jiu-jitsu or your jiu-jitsu itself?
So when it was early purple belt and I started training in East Coast, and I was kind of feeling a bit lost at the time because I didn't know who I was going to grade with after that with Dara. I feel like that's where I kind of started to make the journey to brown belt. It was once I started going to East Coast, that was when I started to open up my game, and I stopped just looking for the tricks and I started looking for just good jiu-jitsu that works. Okay, like if we're passing, he can either do this or this, but either way we're going to have a solid option for that. And then once I went over to Alabama, a lot of the ideas that Brandon had with his top game just fit in so nicely with the stuff that I had learned from Dara. And it was just, that's when I was starting to get compliments on my guard passing, which is weird because up until then I was just sitting on my ass all the time, just playing guard and rubber guard and leg locks.
It seems like East Coast, this keeps coming up. Besides Decatur, it seems like East Coast was a big influence on your life, your game.
Up until then, I spent a lot of time being big fish in a small pond, and that was the first time I got to get regular looks at the truth. Like, you can get better being big fish in a small pond, but you need regular looks at the truth as well. You need to get humbled by someone. Like, the first time I rolled a Sam McNally, I had heard about him, but I was like I think I might have been a blue belt, maybe early purple belt. And at the time I was just like, yeah, I'll just leg lock Sam, be fine. And then I rolled with him and it was like slap, boom, bam, bar. And I was like, wait, what? What just happened? What? It was the most confusing experience of my life, like up until then. It was so weird. It was just like, I felt like I didn't even, it's as if like you just go to start passing the guard and as soon as your hand touches off his hip slightly, you were getting armbarred. It was just, no matter what I did, it was just like, okay, right, I thought crossface was a good thing to do, but apparently not. Like, it was just all the stuff that I thought was an okay thing to do, I just got punished for. But yeah, East Coast was my first look at that, and then Decatur, and then Sean Applegate in Atlanta. Sean Applegate is the best person I've ever rolled at. He hasn't got to show that in competition, but Sean Applegate, no one has ever messed me up like that man has. It's insane.
Another theme that you keep bringing up too is this notion of tricks versus jiu-jitsu. Can you sort of explain to the layman, what do you mean by that? Can you give us a few examples and be a little more specific in terms of tricks versus jiu-jitsu?
So I'm not shitting on boogie chokes. Boogie chokes work. But I just think there's a lot of times where people look for these crazy options. And I'm not saying the boogie choke is that crazy option, but I'm just giving a random example. Sometimes, let's say you're in bottom side control, people can get crazy with the inverted triangles and all this kind of stuff they're going for, when sometimes coming up on a single leg is the easiest thing to do. Like, there's a lot of times where you can just make your life a lot easier by doing something simple like that, but people want to look for these no-arm triangles with your fist in the neck, or trying to triangle someone while they've got double underhooks on you and all this kind of stuff. Like, that kind of stuff to me it just doesn't seem very high percentage on good guys. And I want to be able to use a game on someone that is going to work no matter what. If I can get to the positions I want to get to, you either have you can either go through this door or you can go through this door. Death is somewhere and we're going to find it together. But with tricks, it was just like, back then, I was like just trying to roll for an Imnari or going for flying triangle and just going for this stuff that it was working for me, but I just felt like I wasn't really getting better doing it. I was getting better at those movements, but I wasn't really getting better at jiu-jitsu overall. Like,
do you think they were like false positives?
Yeah, I think so. I think they were getting me good results and I was getting wins in competition with them, but it wasn't like, it was just making my confidence was growing and growing until I run into someone who actually understands, like, let's say a Sean Applegate, who you're not going to just Imanari roll Sean Applegate. Like, when you run into someone like that, then all of a sudden, oh wait, if my game is just based on leg locks and my game plan is based on leg locks, if someone's good at defending leg locks, oh shit, I've no game plan. So that was a big thing when I started to realize, okay, leg locks aren't everything. Do you know what it was? It was a Sean Bollinger seminar I went to a few years ago. He was teaching in Dublin. He was teaching the straitjacket stuff, but something he said was that, let's say you did get attacked on the street. If you did leg lock the guy or armbar the guy, there's a chance he keeps fighting. If you put him to sleep, he goes to sleep. So that was one of the moments where I was like, okay, right, I got to start working on chokes a bit more now. And then SCAF happened, and then I really had to start working on chokes.
Wrestling in Ireland, can you talk about, like, you know, the development of wrestling? Is it where was it when you started and where is it now?
Almost non-existent. It's still very in the early stages. Like, we don't have the wrestling base that Americans have. So we're definitely a lot behind, but there is some really good wrestlers. Like McGregor's wrestling coach, Sergey, he actually owns a gym, SPG Nace. He has some good wrestlers, and when you see his guys compete, you're like, okay, right, that's what having a bit of wrestling can do. But other than that, like, sometimes I feel like a god with wrestling over here, which shouldn't be the case because I'm not very good at wrestling. I have a few things that I chain together well, but I'm not great at wrestling. But neither is anyone. And as I heard someone say before, everything works because everyone sucks.
But you had Keelan over, right? And he's fantastic at wrestling.
Yeah, so we had Elkins over.
Oh, yeah, excuse me, Elkins.
Elkins fantastic at wrestling, and he did teach a good wrestling seminar too. But even the basics of footwork and stuff, you could see the confusion in our guys. It was just everyone was just like, no, I just want to sit down. Let me sit down. Let me go where I'm comfortable.
So are you guys putting a focus on that? I mean, it seems like it would give you such a leg up in your particular academy and your teaching. I've
been trying to teach takedowns a lot more over the last while. It's hard to break the class, especially in our evening classes. Space-wise, it can just be a bit tricky when it comes to the takedowns. So if I'm doing takedowns, a lot of time I'll do it in the morning classes when it's a bit more quiet. Yeah, like even just in the competition that we just had with our guys there, I felt like the last time they all did grappling industries, all the takedowns came from just getting a collar and sleeve and just brute force throwing the guy. Whereas now the guys were off balancing just to get a single leg and just kind of like working from there, getting a few little trips. And it just like the difference has been evident in our guys over the last while. But we also have some good judo guys at our gym as well. I like judo, but I like mixing it with my wrestling as well. And that's where I feel like my takedown game shines. And the only reason I'm able to beat the judo guys or ever able to beat wrestlers is from the mix of the judo and wrestling and just little bits of jiu-jitsu thrown in there.
Can you tell me a time that you wanted to quit and why?
I think when I first went over to Alabama and did the 3 months there, and I just felt like I was living the dream. I felt like it was just the most amazing experience in the world. I got to meet UFC guys. I got to I was like helping Brandon teach guys like Eric Anders and Walt Harris and stuff like that. Just crazy experiences. And then I get to Ireland, and it just wasn't that. And it was just like I just kind of not that I'm like any sort of like big deal or anything, but I just didn't feel appreciated back home compared to how appreciated I felt in Alabama. So when I got back, I definitely went through a bit of a stint of just being a bit miserable, not really sure where I wanted to train, kind of like stopping training for a few weeks and then just wanting to... I was inviting friends over and we were kind of just training out in the garden, but I didn't really just feel comfortable at the gym. And it was definitely a me problem, I think. I know I'll never quit, but I just got to a serious point of confusion, not knowing where my next step was. I think everyone gets there, though. I think everyone... I'm not going to say everyone who, like anyone who says that they haven't got to that point is lying, but I do feel like everyone gets to a point where it's like whether it's maybe you're a competitor and you have this injury and then once you come back, you get another injury straight away. Like there's a lot of stuff that makes people rethink doing this. I put up a post on my story a few weeks ago. It was like the benefits of jiu-jitsu and it said mobility was one of them. And I got so many brown and black belts responding to me being like, bullshit. Everyone just saying, I'm injured, I've got all these injuries. I think it still is great for mobility, but yeah, you're going to pick up an injury here and there.
That's funny. I've heard a physical therapist once say, he's like, I've asked, the audience, what do you want to get out of this? What do you want to get out of this in particular instruction and something? And someone would say, I want to be able to move better, or I want to be stronger, or I want to be more flexible. And then one person said, and he said, this is the best answer you ever heard was, I want to be able to wipe my ass when I'm 80.
Oh yeah, I feel that. It was stuff like that in my mind when I had the neck injury that made me just take those extra few days to nurse it and just make sure it was okay, because I'm the same. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able, like my niece does jiu-jitsu. She's only about to go 8. But I want to be able to do this with my niece 20 years from now. And I have a lot of people around me who might even be a bit younger than me who maybe have had surgery or should have surgery, but they kind of don't want to get the surgery because they're still competing and they've been okay training, even though they definitely should get the surgery. So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's just like, okay, short-term success over long-term mobility and happiness and being able to train with my niece and stuff. I'm definitely more conscious of that. Like I used to say yes to every single round, and now sometimes, like even if it's a big guy who I know I can beat, I'm just kind of like, nah. Sometimes I'll do it. Sometimes it's just like, okay, I know I can beat you, but even if I win every exchange in the round, he's not sore by the end of it. I'm sore. I'm sore from the stupidest little movement that he did when I thought I was in a good position. So I'm definitely a lot more careful with who I choose to roll with. But then sometimes the monkey brain takes over and you do what you do.
Early on, your perspective shifts. Sort of when we were talking about tricks, or in that example, saying yes all the time to rounds with, guys of any size. And then you get to this point where you're like, there's, the tread on the tire is sort of thinning off and I need to be a little more deliberate about that. Do you get that perspective at times?
I want to be able to train every day. I want to be able to train tomorrow. And as much as my ego will sometimes try to drive the bus and say, yeah, you should roll with that giant purple belt over there, I've just got better at saying no to that. But I remember in the early days, Brandon said something similar to this before as well. In the early days, I wanted to be able to beat everyone. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to be able to beat everyone. And now I want someone to beat me. I want someone to come in and outclass me and prove me, make me realize that I'm not as good as I feel sometimes. I want that now. I don't want to have to do that with bigger guys all the time as well. Whereas okay, right, you're going to outclass me. That's great. And I'm going to appreciate that, but I'm also going to be really sore and my shoulder's going to be tight and all this. And then I'm not going to want to roll the next day. Yeah.
Advice to those who compete. I'm talking about people who just have everyday jobs and stuff, not professionals, and they're going to the smaller tournaments or whatever, and they just haven't won gold yet for whatever reason, right? And they're just really sort of disappointed by it. They're not getting results that they want.
Yeah, I got steamrolled in my first few competitions. I got steamrolled bad, and I went in thinking, okay, I've been doing pretty good in my gym now. I'm going to destroy in this competition. And then I remember I went for a flying triangle in this guy, and he was literally just standing there with me upright and just not fazed by it whatsoever. And then he just shook me off and bent me up. I say to my guys all the time, if they ever get upset over a loss, I guarantee I've lost a lot more than you have, and I'm still sticking at it. I've lost more brown belt and purple belt than I ever have, and I still love it. Like, I'm not going out there to try to lose. I just love the whole experience of it all. And like, at the end of the day, people will put too much pressure on themselves to win, and they'll like get mad at themselves if they lose. But at the end of the day, the whole team's still going to Burger King. We're still going and getting pizza. We're still going and doing something like that. And that's what I love. Like, regardless, the team are still going to be there. The team are still going to be here for you. We're going to show up to training on Monday, and we're going to do what we do. I think it's just, you just have to stay consistent with it, and don't put so much pressure on yourself, because as much as we like to think it's a big deal, we're just rolling around with men on the floor, getting sweaty in a basketball hall or something like that at a competition. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. And yeah, you do want good results, but I don't know if you ever heard BMAC telling the story about he went to compete, and he was traveling out of state, went far, was driving for hours, went and competed, lost his first match, and he texted Lindsay afterwards. He was like, Lindsay, I lost my match. I'm sorry. I'm on my way home. I'll be home tomorrow. And Lindsay responded with, I found a dead squirrel in my closet. And then Brandon was just like, even my wife, my loving wife, who I love dearly, we have a great marriage with, did not care if I won or lost. It doesn't matter. Like, no one cares if you win or lose except for you. Like, that was one of the best responses I've ever heard to something like that ever. Lindsay is one of my favorite people in the world. I love that woman. But
she's great.
Yeah, I think it's hard to not put the pressure on yourself. Like, you expect yourself to do good, especially when you've you put in like a little training camp, or what you consider a training camp, and then you show up to the competition. If you get steamrolled on that first day, on the first match, it hurts. It stings so bad. Let it hurt, but not for too long, and then see what that hurt has to say. Every person I know who has lost in competitions but still stuck at it has made huge jumps, like huge strides in their game, just from these competitions, just from a little shift in perspective that happens just when you lose, or maybe you were so confident you were going to win, and you get completely destroyed and you get ragdolled. Like, it's good to have those moments. I think it's good to be able to take not necessarily take the criticism, but like to be able to take that feedback on board and realize that, okay, you do have stuff to work on, and like, we're still only getting started at jiu-jitsu. Like, we're still have a lot to do, and like, it's a long process. Like, I'm 10 years in and I still feel shit some days. It happens. Some days you're going to feel great, and some days you're going to feel terrible, and then you're going to be pissed off at yourself. But those days are going to happen. It's just important that you just keep showing up regardless.
Do you study film? Like, after...
I obsess over win or lose. I obsess over it, and I think I don't really watch instructionals anymore. I used to years ago. I don't have the head to sit down and watch instructionals. If I see a video that I'm like, oh, I could apply that to my game, I'll start adding it in and messing around with it and just kind of playing around with it. But in terms of like studying, it's mostly just watching myself roll, because I feel like then I'm able to pick up on, okay, maybe I went for this pass that BMAC taught me or Dara taught me, but I didn't do that detail that they mentioned was important. So I can just remember next roll, okay, right, next time you do that pass, keep that in mind.
Of the instructionals, that was going to be one of the questions. Of the instructionals that you watched early on, were any of them sort of influential in any way? It seems like now you're at the point where you get the concept, so you can play around sort of with these things.
I don't even think it was necessarily instructionals. I think it was just so in the early days when I was all about rubber guard and leg locks, having Eddie Bravo's website. But then there was the guy who I was talking about from Portland, who gave me some of the Nathan Orchard leg lock stuff. He had a website for a while called Project Cauliflower Ear, and he used to get a few different coaches. So Sean Applegate would teach some stuff on it, Brandon would teach some stuff on it, and I think that was a huge part of my development. But other than that, I don't really spend a huge amount of time watching instructionals. I never really did, or maybe I'd have watched them once, but I just wouldn't really take all the information in. But then when I started doing the work for BMAC and started dealing with his social media, it's like I'm getting paid to study. Like, I have to edit videos for him. So it's just like I'm forced to study every day. It just doesn't feel like I'm necessarily studying. But then sometimes maybe I'm just like trying to teach something in the gym for a few weeks, but then I see a certain detail that I'm reminded of when I'm editing one of BMAC's videos. And I just take that one detail to class that day, and I'm just going to try roll and just try implement that one detail and see how I get on.
So you don't have any formal off the mat study type of routine or anything like that then?
Study BMAC stuff, and like not just BMAC stuff, but I don't do a huge amount of study these days. It's kind of just I just pick something that, okay, right, my De La Hiva is terrible, so I'm going to spend some time with my De La Hiva. Like, I just have an idea where I'm lacking, and I'm just going to try. Like, I remember Dara saying before that, right, so Dara's a black belt, but at the time he was saying that, okay, right, my knee cut on my left side is probably a black belt level knee cut. The one on my left side might only be a blue or purple belt level one. And that kind of stuck in my head because there's so many things. Like, my arm triangle is probably one of my best moves. As long as I'm doing it with my left arm. If I'm arm triangling you with my right arm, you're safe, you're fine. I probably can't finish that at all. So there's a lot of things like that where my arm triangle, I feel like it's brown or like black belt level on my left arm, and my right arm, it's white belt. Maybe two stripes. But it's been pretty cool. It's like the arm triangle was one of the moves that I struggled with for so long. And there was a month where BMAC was teaching it, and I could not get it. I could not grasp it at all. Could not get it clean. And then it just clicked. It just became one of my best moves. And now I see my white belts in the gym hitting better arm triangles than I was hitting at like early brown belt. Like it's nice to see the moves that I've struggled with, my guys are hitting now. And like, I'm grateful for BMAC and SCAF for that, but it's also nice to see that the stuff that I'm teaching is working for the guys. And they're getting some use out of the stuff that like I would have struggled with a long time ago, but now they're able to implement it. And it's nice seeing a white belt pull off a Dars cleanly. And I'm just like, damn, I don't think I pulled off a Dars clean until purple belt, like mid purple belt.
Your thoughts on the future of jiu-jitsu? Your perspective?
The one thing that just popped into my head was the Craig Jones video I seen a while ago with them budgie smugglers. I really hope that does not. I really hope the future of no-gi jiu-jitsu is not in those budgie smugglers. That's we don't need that. Please, I love Craig Jones. He's one of my. I think he's one of the best things in jiu-jitsu. The man could literally retire and become a comedian and would do great. But my God, I don't want them budgie smugglers. As for the future of jiu-jitsu, I think there's always going to be some gi stuff. Gi stuff will always be in existence, but even though, I don't know, no gi does seem to be the future. And leg locks have become so much like everyone is like almost over leg locks to the point where they're still working. But now it's like I love seeing the game developing now where people are like getting really good at passing the guard and taking the back off leg locks. That's the stuff I love watching right now.
You mentioned I can't remember. It was a young lady. I don't know what it was.
My niece. Yeah, my niece.
Excuse me. And that's what we're seeing now, right? Is like globally is these kids that are coming, at, even younger ages starting now. Your thoughts on that?
I think because jiu-jitsu wasn't really a known thing for me when I was growing up anyway, that kind of thing wasn't around, where now there's so many people my age who may have kids who now they're making sure their kids are involved with jiu-jitsu. Like my niece, ever since she was a baby and couldn't even like move around much, we were still doing jiu-jitsu with her, but they were just games and she didn't know it was jiu-jitsu. Like it might just be, okay, like ever since she could walk and kind of like stand on her own 2 feet, I'd just be like, oh, I bet you can't get a single leg on me. And then she'll reach out, she'll just grab my leg and I'll stay really heavy on the leg and I'll just be like, oh, it's really heavy, you can't lift it. I wonder what happens if you drive into me. And then she'd drive into me and lift the leg up. And I'd be like, oh, but you're not going to get me down with just a single leg. You're going to have to get a double leg. And just like little stuff like that. And she's laughing the whole time and giggling and having fun. Doesn't feel like she's doing jiu-jitsu. But I think it's been really fun over the years having that stuff. And then now getting to see her actually training where she's pulling some of the stuff off. Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more. The kids right now are, like, I see some kids in East Coast Jiu-Jitsu. I think Marcus Phelan is the guy who's like kind of helping coach these guys. But these kids terrify me. Like I'm looking at these guys competing and they're hitting like such clean throws with wrestling as well. Wrestling and judo and hitting some slick jiu-jitsu to the point where I'm just like, the only thing stopping him from beating me is size. That's it. That's literally the only thing. I think the future in Ireland is going to definitely have a lot more wrestling and takedowns because of people like Marcus who are putting in the effort to make sure their kids are well-rounded.
Yeah, I know when I go with these, if I ever like, train with a kid or something like that, and I feel like, oh, this kid's going to be, could potentially have something. I'm always like, remember who was nice to you, because I know that they're going to come up and they're going to kill me soon,
Yep. It's teaching snakes to bite you. Teaching jiu-jitsu is teaching snakes to bite you. And that's been really evident with me over the last few weeks because like I usually only spend like a few weeks on a subject, but I spent about 6 or 7 weeks on the front headlock system that I was trying to do. And after the 6 or 7 weeks, I could see that like all the guys who I used to let touch my head and do whatever they wanted and I'd feel confident became guys who I was like, I'm not letting you touch my head. I'm not dealing with this. It's not worth it.
Now, you've named several names already, but can you tell us some jiu-jitsu practitioners that you admire and why?
So Brandon, obvious one. I'm super biased with that. Matt Scaff, another one. Sean Applegate, and pretty much all of Sean Applegate's guys coming up. They're all just so fun to watch. Absolute snipers with their attacks. As for Ireland, Dara O'Connell is up there. He's like probably the most accomplished competitor in the country. Tom Halpin. Richie B is a big one. Richie B is someone everyone needs to look out for. I'll butcher his name, Bukovskin. I'm not sure. Richie's going to beat me up regardless when I eventually get to roll with him. So I suppose it doesn't matter if it's there or not.
It's the thought that matters. Come on. Keith, how'd you learn to tie your belt?
It was probably like a Stephen Kesting video or something like that. But then when I remember I went to East Coast and I was tying my belt and I knew how to tie my belt, but I was definitely a bit slower at it. But then everyone else was tying their belt so quick without looking and I was like, God damn, you guys are fast. This is ridiculous. But I was definitely doing it a more complicated way than most people.
Oh, wow.
It was secure. It worked, but it was definitely too time consuming. I felt like an idiot just being the only person there trying to get my belt ready and stuff while everyone else is already fully dressed. And now, like, I'm confident in my ability to tie a belt, but if I was to tie a belt on someone else, my God, I get confused. Yeah, no way. It's rough. I've had to do it a few times, and it's just like even if I'm reffing at competitions and it's like a kids competition, and then they have to get that extra like green and yellow belt over as I'm trying to tie that onto them. I remember the last time I was reffing, I did it a few times, but then eventually I was just like, here, I just handed it to their coach. I was like, please do that.
Yeah, that's tough, man. That's tough.
If you want your student to compete within the next 5 business days, like they just do it. Just you tie it for me.
So speaking of you giving someone a belt, there was a video on BMAC of you brought over a young guy with Ireland with you, right? And you awarded him his blue belt in Decatur as well, correct?
So so I've given him his blue belt. He's now a purple belt under me as well. I gave him his purple belt last year. He was 16 at the time, saved up his own money to come over to Alabama and train for 2 weeks or something like that. And at the time, I had said to BMAC, I think he's ready for the blue belt. I want you to kind of give your idea of it. And there was a few days of him rolling, but then there was one day he was rolling with one guy in particular. And then I just looked over at BMAC and he looked at me and BMAC just went, yep, it's time. And then because my brain was just so fixated on giving him the belt and how was I going to give him the belt, I did not see the brown belt coming because BMAC gave me my brown belt right after that. And I was in absolute shock. Because I think I probably would have expected it if it was any other time. Because I had been getting the better of a lot of the like higher belts, and a lot of guys who I was getting the better of were getting promoted as well. I kind of just felt like it was going to happen sometime soon. But because I was so fixated on giving the other promotion, I was so caught off guard with that.
You were a gamer for a while. I even had I believe a Twitch account that I checked out that was maybe 4 videos and then kind of dead. You sort of touched on it about the lockdowns. I think you might even had a couple of YouTube videos on it. I don't know. And is there any correlations to jiu-jitsu and gaming, you think?
There kind of is some correlations, but I think it's kind of like the way people will say jiu-jitsu is like chess. I just feel like in a lot of those games, it's not just aim and shoot. There's like, you kind of have to set traps for people. Like if you want to be able to kill multiple people, you can't just stand and bang. You got to be able to like strategically set traps for them and have them fall into those traps. And so I think there is a correlation between them. Yeah, it's still very different. It's the same with chess as well, though. Chess is still very different to jiu-jitsu.
I agree.
The consequences are much more dire.
So, Keith, your content, I noticed you got a lot of stuff on Instagram, some fantastic videos there. Your YouTube channel, I went to, there's like 4 or 5 videos, and it just it's gone. And I think it was from a few years ago. Why can't we get more Keith? I mean, you would have a fantastic YouTube channel, I think.
Yeah, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot more over the last few weeks, especially since I've been getting more content. I've been getting one of the guys at the gym to record more content for me. And there is times where like maybe I have a video that's just like it's too long to be a short, and then I try to cut it into a few shorts, but I would be better off just kind of posting those on YouTube as well. So I think I will. Yeah, I need to get on board with YouTube, because even right now it's literally just Instagram that I'm posting to. I was posting to Facebook just for a bit, but not much. TikTok, I can't stand. And also TikTok does not seem to like jiu-jitsu from my experience of working for different people, jiu-jitsu people. But yeah, I do need to get back into YouTube and actually like be consistent with it. Because it's hard when it's like the work that I do when I have to edit videos and post videos for all these different people. I feel so lazy by the end of it, but I need to be on top of it and actually put out the content, because I still have so many videos that like I haven't even posted. So I should do that, or should just post up like videos of rolling or whatever. Even the little commentary sort of video that I did a few days ago, people seem to like that. So I think if I did some rolling videos with that, might be okay. Got some ideas, and I think Brandon would be happy to hear that I was like actually pushing for the YouTube thing.
So speaking of, Keith, where can we get more information about you and like everything you're up to, man?
Instagram, usually at Keith Kavanagh on Instagram, KeithKavanagh. YouTube, you'll find it. If you just type in Keith Kavanagh versus, you'll find one of my matches, you'll find it. But it might be worth subscribing and just seeing if I do start posting there over the next few weeks.
And separate question, Irish Keith. How did you get that name? What does it mean? Can you explain the origin of that?
Right, so I've always hated my name, Keith, like the Keith, and with the Keith at the end. But because of our accent, we don't pronounce the H at the end. It's just Keith. So I was over in Atlanta, and I was with Sean Applegate and Chase Hanna in Chick-fil-A. And I went, made my order, and they asked me what my name was, and I said Keith. And then the girl looked at me confused, and then my order came out and the receipt said Keet, and Sean Applegate found this hilarious, and they just started calling me Irish Keith, and it stuck. It just stuck, and I was happy that it stuck, because like now, unless it's like an official document, I will write Keet for my name. If I'm writing someone a birthday card or something like that, it's going to be Keet every time.
So awesome. That's fantastic. That's a great
story. Chick-fil-A is the origin story of that nickname.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Everyone out there, thanks for watching. I am your host, Adolfo Ferranda. Do the whole subscribe, thumbs up, positive review. Think about joining the VIP and the whole thing. Keith, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Your time, man. It was a blast.
I appreciate that. Cheers.